My wife won a $9 million lottery jackpot. Then she filed for divorce and threw me out of our home. But she and her parents forgot about the prenuptial agreement they made me sign before we got married. My name is Ryan, and I am 35 years old. My name is Ryan, and I am 35 years old. I come from a simple background. My parents live in a quiet suburb. I grew up in a small 3-bedroom house that always smelled like clean laundry and home-cooked food. After I graduated from high school, I worked a series of different jobs. I was a bartender for a while. I helped out at my uncle's hardware store. Eventually, I became the manager of a local sporting goods shop. My life was not glamorous, but it was honest. Rachel, on the other hand, came from a world I had never known. Her parents owned several properties. They drove fancy cars and threw big, flashy parties a few times a year. Let's just call them my father-in-law or FIL, and my mother-in-law or MIL. My FIL was a tall, powerful man. He had a quiet dominance that filled any room he was in. He would make casual comments that felt more like hidden threats or manipulations. My MIL was just as skilled at showing her disapproval in subtle ways. She could make people feel small with just one raised eyebrow. They were never openly cruel to me, but I could always feel their disapproval just beneath their polite words. After Rachel and I got engaged, I realized how much her parents feared outsiders getting their hands on the family's assets. They looked at me like I was an intruder, even though Rachel and I had been dating for years. Before we could set a date for the wedding, my FIL demanded that I sign a prenuptial agreement. I did not have the money to fight it with a lawyer, and I was too blinded by love to see the problem. I kept telling myself it was just a symbolic paper to make her parents happy. Love was all the guarantee I needed, right? The day I signed that document is still clear in my mind. It was a warm afternoon at her parents' massive house. My FIL laid the papers on the table and slid a pen toward me. My MIL offered me a cup of coffee, as if it were a normal business meeting. Rachel stood off to the side and did not say much. That hurt me, but I brushed it aside. I figured it would not matter in the long run. The contract basically said that any gifts, inheritances, or trust funds that belonged to her family would remain her separate property. But it also said that any major asset we got together, like a house or lottery winnings, would be marital property. I thought that part was strange, but I just wanted to marry her. 6 months later, we had a beautiful wedding by a lake. My parents were overwhelmed by how fancy everything was, but they were supportive. I remember seeing the tension on my father's face when he greeted my in-laws. He had always told me to trust my gut feeling, but I thought love would be stronger than any doubts. The first couple of years of our marriage passed without any major problems. We lived in a condo that her parents had helped us get. I made a payment toward the mortgage every month, even though her father had provided the down payment as a gift. Looking back, it was never really a gift. It was more like a tool to control us. But at the time, I just thought that was how wealthy families worked. Our marriage had the usual arguments about money. We also had occasional blowouts about our parents interfering in our lives. They would show up at our condo without calling first. They would bring new furniture or decorations. Sometimes, they would rearrange our entire living room without even asking. When I got frustrated, Rachel would just brush it off. She called it her parents' helpful nature. Then came the day that changed everything. Rachel called me, breathless with excitement. She told me she had won a $9 million lottery jackpot. She had bought a random ticket at a gas station. At first I was overjoyed. I started dreaming of quitting our jobs and traveling the world. But my joy did not last long. She insisted that we keep the winnings a secret, even from my own parents. She became strangely paranoid. She talked about claiming the money the proper way and meeting with lawyers I had never even met. When I asked if I could join her in these meetings, she said, "You would feel out of place." That stung. I had no idea that a much bigger bombshell was about to drop. One afternoon, I came home from work, completely exhausted. I found Rachel in our bedroom with her aunt. They were going through the drawers. She dropped the news on me as if it were nothing. She was filing for divorce. She told me to pack my bags and leave the condo. She claimed the condo was under her name. I was stunned. I had been making monthly mortgage payments. But apparently, she believed that her father's down payment and her new fortune made me irrelevant. I felt my heart shatter into pieces. I called my father, my voice shaking. I told him I had just been kicked out of my own home. It was the ultimate betrayal. But the biggest shock was still to come. I found out that my FIL had sent his personal attorney to help Rachel. They wanted me out of the picture, so they could keep the lottery winnings for themselves. But they had forgotten the terms of the very prenup they had forced me to sign. Instead of protecting their daughter completely, the document said that any windfall acquired during the marriage was a joint asset. Suddenly, I realized that if they insisted on divorcing me right after she won the jackpot, they might not get to keep all the money. I decided I had to handle things very carefully. My father urged me to stay calm, get a lawyer from outside their social circle, and prepare for a nasty fight. I was determined not to give up. They had thrown down the first punch. They were pushing me around like I was a disposable piece of trash. If they thought I would just walk away quietly, they had severely underestimated me. I spent a few nights at my parents' house, trying to process the shock. My mother was furious. She ranted about how my in-laws had been disrespectful from day one. My father was just as angry, but he stayed practical. He contacted an old friend who was a family law attorney and got me an appointment for the next morning. Sitting in that attorney's office, I felt a mix of anger and relief. I told him the whole story. I told him how the in-laws insisted on the prenup. I told him how my wife had just won $9 million and then blindsided me with a divorce. When he looked over the prenup, he actually chuckled. "They shot themselves in the foot," he said. "They specifically included language that puts lottery winnings under marital assets. Unless a judge does some kind of wild legal interpretation, you are entitled to a substantial portion of that money." Hearing those words was like being thrown a lifeline. I had been so worried that the prenup would lock me out of everything. But it turned out that their fear of me claiming their inherited wealth had made them overlook the possibility of a lottery win. My lawyer warned me that it would not be easy. My in-laws were wealthy and well-connected. They would likely hire a whole team of lawyers. But he believed we had a strong case, especially since I had contributed financially to the marriage and had been abruptly thrown out of our shared home. I asked him about the divorce process in our state. A contested divorce could easily last for months, or even longer. But if Rachel's side realized their legal position was weak, they might try to settle quickly. The lawyer predicted that they would try to intimidate me or use underhanded tactics to get me to sign away my rights for a small amount of money. He was right. Within a few days, my file left me a menacing voicemail. He told me to back off because I did not deserve anything from his daughter. He claimed that if I tried to go after the lottery winnings, he would make sure I ended up with nothing. My lawyer just advised me to document everything. Then my Mile cornered me outside my parents' home. She offered me a pitifully small amount of money to just disappear quietly. She presented it as a generous deal, but the amount she offered would not even cover half of the mortgage payments I had made. I refused. I told her we would see each other in court. She scoffed, clearly surprised by my defiance. She was not used to anyone rejecting her money. With negotiations going nowhere, my lawyer filed motions to make sure the lottery funds could not be hidden or transferred. That enraged my in-laws. They started spinning tales about me being a gold digger who had preyed on their innocent daughter. It hurt to hear those things, but I stood firm. My boss, who owned the sporting goods shop, had my back. He brushed off my file's attempts to interfere with my job. Friends started to take sides. Some of them called me petty. Others applauded me for fighting back. The tension was suffocating, but I refused to give in. After a couple of weeks of pointless negotiations, we got a court date. I had not seen Rachel in person at all. She was practically hiding under her parents' protective wing. She ignored all of my direct attempts to communicate. She had her lawyers do all the talking. They claimed I was a leech who had contributed nothing to the marriage. My lawyer pushed back with our financial records. We had proof of the bills I paid and the explicit clause in the prenup about windfalls. We also highlighted how I had been violently shut out of our condo. The judge ordered both sides to prepare for a more formal hearing on how to divide the assets. In one last attempt to intimidate me, my file threatened my boss again. My boss promptly told him to get lost. That only made my file angrier. My lawyer said we needed to proceed carefully, but he was confident that a judge would see through their scare tactics. Nothing could have prepared me for the final showdown in court. But at least I knew that the law was, ironically, on my side, thanks to the very prenup they had forced on me. Weeks passed, and the tension leading up to the upcoming hearing was at an all-time high. Rachel still avoided any direct contact with me, but her lawyers bombarded my lawyer with motions. They insisted that the lottery win was separate property, because she had purchased the ticket. They completely ignored the language in the prenup that said any major windfall during the marriage was marital property. Meanwhile, my fiel tried to ruin my reputation among my friends and business contacts. He kept peddling the story that I was a gold digger who had only married into the family for their money. During this time, I felt a mix of frustration and motivation. If they believed they could bully me out of what I was legally entitled to, they were mistaken. I had documents that showed how I had contributed to our shared life. I had utility bills, grocery receipts, and records of my partial mortgage payments. My attorney and I went over every detail of the prenup. He pointed out a critical sentence. It specified that all financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, shall be considered marital assets unless expressly designated otherwise. It was like my in-laws had left a back door wide open without even realizing it. A week before the hearing, we had a preliminary status conference. Rachel arrived with her parents and a whole group of lawyers. There were 4 attorneys plus a financial advisor. They looked at me with the same superior attitude as always. But their expressions changed when my lawyer calmly produced the prenup and highlighted the exact clause about lottery proceeds. The judge listened quietly. She seemed unimpressed by their attempts to dismiss it. She ordered that all substantial assets remain frozen until the main hearing. That same afternoon, my Mile cornered me outside the courthouse. She insisted that we should talk, like adults. She tried to offer me a lump sum of money that was even lower than her previous offer. She called it generous. For someone of my background. I refused again. I told her we would let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, as if I were the one who had blindsided her daughter with a divorce. The hypocrisy of it all made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. My lawyer had warned me not to get into heated arguments that could be twisted and used against me later. Behind the scenes, I was worried that my in-laws might try to hide the lottery winnings in secret accounts. My lawyer had anticipated this. He requested court orders that prevented any large transfers of money. We also arranged to have a forensic accountant ready in case we suspected them of hiding funds. My file's anger flared. He left me a voicemail, calling me vile things. He accused me of draining the love out of his daughter's life. This was rich, considering they were the ones who threw me out right after she hit the jackpot. As the hearing approached, I prepared carefully with my attorney. We rehearsed my statement to make sure I would appear calm and factual in court. I had copies of the prenup, receipts for the mortgage payments I had made, and even text messages where Rachel acknowledged our joint bills. The lawyer recommended that I keep my answers short and let the evidence speak for itself. If they tried to create emotional drama, we would counter with clear documentation. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, my heart pounding. My parents came with me for moral support, though they waited outside the courtroom once the proceedings began. Stepping inside, I saw Rachel seated beside her father. Both of them had stone, cold expressions on their faces. Her mother lingered in the back, her arms folded. My file's lawyers, with their polished suits, looked confident. Perhaps they believed that their money and legal power could beat the facts. The judge was a stern woman in her 50s. She did not waste any time. She invited each side to present their arguments. Rachel's lead attorney tried to frame me as a minor contributor to the marriage. He said I had done little more than live in the same space. They argued that the lottery ticket was her personal purchase, made with her money. But my lawyer calmly pointed out how the prenup explicitly included such windfalls as marital property. We also had bank records showing that she had used our joint account card on the day she bought the ticket. When we introduced that piece of evidence, I saw a visible wave of tension go through my file's camp. The judge asked if they had any documents that proved it was her personal funds. They fumbled for an answer. They claimed the card was used by accident, or that the money in the account was from her father's deposit. But the bank statements clearly had both of our names on them, not hers alone. The judge took note, her gaze shifting to them with expectation. Finally, Rachel spoke. She claimed she never wanted to hurt me. She said her parents had pushed for the divorce once the jackpot arrived, in order to protect their family assets. She stumbled over her words. She admitted she felt pressured, but she also tried to justify it. Everyone would come after us if they knew about the money, she said. My lawyer asked her if she had consulted me before making these decisions. She admitted that she had not. The judge's disapproval was becoming obvious. By midday, it was clear that the prenuptial agreement was a double-edged sword for them. The very document they had enforced to protect their wealth now threatened to place a massive chunk of the lottery winnings in my hands. The judge scheduled another hearing for the final decisions. She stated that she was inclined to treat the lottery as a major marital asset, subject to fair distribution. Outside, my fel walked past me and muttered, "This is far from over." But his confidence was definitely cracked. In the weeks leading up to the final ruling, their desperation grew. My fiel's lawyers tried everything. They filed motions to reconsider the prenup's wording. They claimed the intent had not been to include lottery proceeds. The judge denied these motions. She pointed to the plain language of the document. My Mimiel tried to corner me again. She warned me that I would regret it if I broke their family. I told her, point blank, that they had started this by kicking me out and blindsiding me with a divorce. Rachel tried to reach out. She left emotional voicemails saying she did not want things to end so bitterly. She said that if we could just come to a private arrangement, we could still salvage some kind of relationship. I might have considered it if they had treated me fairly from the start. But after the intimidation, the lies, and being forced out of my home, my trust was gone. My lawyer advised me not to engage in these back-channel talks. We had a strong legal position. There was no reason to settle for crumbs. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with attorneys for both sides. My father, mother, and a few friends came to support me. They sat quietly in the back. The judge took her seat. She reviewed the updated filings and allowed for final statements. My file's lead lawyer tried one last gamble. He painted me as a cunning opportunist who had only discovered the prenup's loophole after benefiting from the family's generosity. My lawyer countered with the straightforward facts. 1. They forced me to sign the prenup. 2. It explicitly included lottery winnings as shared property. And 3. While my FEL had financed part of our condo, I had contributed monthly, so it was not a purely separate asset either. Furthermore, the quick divorce filing right after the jackpot was textbook evidence of their plan to isolate me from the winnings. The judge listened patiently. Then she delivered her ruling. She declared that the lottery winnings clearly fell under the category of marital assets, according to the prenup's language. She criticized my in-laws for trying to twist the agreement that they themselves had drafted. She also found that Rachel's immediate eviction of me from the condo was unreasonable. She said I was entitled to be reimbursed for my portion of the mortgage and other marital contributions. In short, the judge set forth an order. I would receive a substantial percentage of the lottery payout, plus reimbursement for my share in the condo. We parted ways with a finalization date set for a few weeks later, just to process the paperwork. My fiel's face was like thunder. My Emil looked outraged and was whispering furiously to him. Rachel stood there with tears in her eyes. Maybe they were tears of genuine regret, or maybe they were from anger at losing so much money. I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. We had once loved each other, but greed, parental influence, and their attempts to exploit me had shattered everything. In the aftermath, their lawyers tried to propose a slightly modified settlement. They were likely hoping I would accept a smaller sum to avoid any more drama. My lawyer recommended that we finalize the judge's ruling as it was. We had no reason to accept less. The only concession I made was giving up all my interest in the condo. I never wanted to set foot in that place again. They cut me a check for an impressive amount of money. Was it half of the jackpot? Not exactly, but it was big enough to let me rebuild my life comfortably. Throughout this whole ordeal, I realized that my in-laws, in their arrogance, believed that their wealth protected them from consequences. They did not expect me to fight back effectively. The prenuptial agreement they had insisted on ironically became the very tool that secured my share of the winnings. It was poetic justice, if there ever was such a thing. As far as I know, Rachel remains under her parents' wing. She has lost face in her social circle because of the public fiasco that erupted. Some mutual acquaintances told me that she is struggling with guilt, but I doubt she will ever openly admit her family's role in orchestrating this whole mess. I used part of the settlement to help my parents upgrade their home. As a way to thank them for standing by me, I invested another portion. The entire ordeal left me scarred. It changed how I view trust, marriage, and money. But I take comfort in knowing that I stood my ground. I refused to be bullied into accepting table scraps. While it was an excruciatingly painful experience, the final outcome felt like a triumph over tyranny. Now, I am free from my in-laws' manipulative grasp, and I am moving forward. I have returned to a simpler life, ironically similar to my life before marriage. But I am stronger, wiser, and not at all the knave man they assumed they could steamroll. If they remember anything about me, let it be that they inadvertently gave me the legal weapon to ensure I was not left with nothing. They started the war. I finished it, and that is the end of this chapter.